Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Artcast. Today, we're going to be taking a little look at a quick doodle I did of Agent Honeydew from Dial M for Monkey, which of course was a sub-cartoon of Dexter's Laboratory. This seems like a pretty good video to discuss a topic that's been floating around Twitter for a while. You'll see a little later on I will have to construct a gun, and I will literally make that in a 3D program called Blender. You'll see several attempts at a hand-drawn gun using perspective and some of the ruler tools that's in Paint Tool Saya or Saya, whichever. I can never remember what preference or what that's really supposed to be. You'll see a few attempts, and then I just sort of get tired, get bored. I said I'll learn how to do this properly later on, but for now I'll just go into Blender and I will construct a quick 3D gun and then mat it onto the sketch and then clean up the lines afterwards. And it turned out like pretty good. And I've done this technique before. And it reminded me of something I saw on Twitter. One Robert A. Marzolo, he posted a little Twitter video of him drawing some Spawn. I believe he does work on the Spawn comic, and he says, I got tired of drawing every chain, so I made a custom brush for it. And you just got the hashtags brush, custom brush, Clip Studio Paint, which is the program that's been making a huge splash. It was fairly popular as an alternative to a lot of art programs, but it's been really picking up steam ever since the Photoshop debacle, where they'll say, well, we can sue you for using older versions of our software, and we're going to be charging monthly fees, or they have been charging monthly fees, and they're going to go up on them, which is why I stopped using Photoshop a long time ago. I still have it loaded on all my computers, older computers, and I'm going to continue using them if I absolutely need to. Yeah, good luck with that. Good luck setting the precedent with that. Precedent. That's the thing. These corporations, they say they'll do stuff, but they don't actually want to take anything to court, because if they lose, then they ruin it for everybody. Not everybody. They ruin it for other corporations who don't want to. They would screw other corporations over in a heartbeat. They just don't want to ruin it for themselves. Anyway, that little outburst. Okay, you can totally see my my first attempt at a gun. Even then, I wasn't really happy with the shape of it, so I was like, I'll just fiddle around in Blender, and you'll see that footage in a little bit. Robert, he's got a few chains drawn by hand, but he goes over them with a custom brush that he made. And I'd say it looks good. The final product looks good. But of course, this caused a bit of a debate online about whether this is, lazy, whether it shows any artistic skill. And it's not without its flaws, because the chains do seem a little bit more fluid than chains should be. There's particularly one part where you can see the chain bending at an angle, at a curve that it wouldn't be if it were more of a rigid structure. So this is not without its faults. Also, you can't draw the chain in perspective. This is merely a brush that travels along a flat 2D plane, so you can't have a chain moving towards the audience in a 3D perspective, and much like this gun that I'm trying to draw. Okay, actually going back to the gun, this is my second attempt where I've constructed the gun in a flat 1D panel, and I'm going to attempt to copy it, pull the layer over a bit, and then just make a 3D. This is another little trick that works sometimes, but I don't know. I didn't like it. Particularly, there was one response from Mr. Eric Powell, whose work I love greatly. For those who don't know, Eric Powell, he after his tenure at Marvel, who he was great for, he was known for drawing his monsters and just really fantastic, visceral line art. He went on to create the Goon, of course, which I would not say is as famous as like Hellboy. Certainly not. Hellboy has gotten like 4 movies, like 5 if you include all the animated. And there was supposed to be a Goon movie, and there was a 3D test. It was supposed to be computer animated. Never got off the ground, unfortunately. And it looked fantastic. That was just bullshit. It looked great. But he basically was kind of more or less not happy with Robert's performance. He basically said on Twitter, confused why some good artists are retweeting a guy bragging about using a digital cheat as if it's a good thing. It's like bragging about using it's like bragging about using autotune on an album. Hear that note? This is quotation marks. Like, hear that note? That was auto-tuned as fuck, man. Cool, right? Right? And right with 3 question marks behind it. As someone who draws digitally and traditionally, yeah, sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do to make the deadline. But to brag about cheats feels weird. Being lazy and cutting corners isn't a good thing. And then I also included one reply afterwards, and it says, there's no such thing as cheating when it comes to creating. You don't need to do everything the hard way. You can if you want to. When it comes to time and budget, it's often most effective possibly while finding a balance between quality and speed. Thank you, Ryan, at CYN you can give him a follow. And I suggest you give Eric Powell a follow, too. He's just... he good artist. I follow him for all his projects and his insight on things. He just kind of reminds me a little bit of Chuck Jones in that regard. Chuck Jones, who of course was not an adamant supporter of TV animation. I believe I discussed this many times before, but just as a quick refresher, he called it visual radio. You know, the cartoons of the '60s and the where it was just some characters talking for a little bit and moving slightly, and then you got quick bursts of animation. Imagine this is a little bit more of Eric's philosophy as well. Oh, you can see me kind of trying to futz with perspective, but I'm not doing it right because you get a curve in the gun. You know what? I could have pulled that off if I put more resolution in the model. But this is just a quick model. Actually, no, that solution wouldn't be horribly difficult. I just need to have to subdivide a couple times. But then I think that would have ruined the geometry of some of these clean edges. Although it wouldn't matter because I'm going over those edges again in ink. I was sort of happy with that. Not sort of. I was actually really happy. And it was a way of getting a good representation of a gun that I wanted in the directed in the direction I wanted it, and it was done. Now Eric seems to have like a really interesting philosophy here. He's not like saying, "Oh, this is lazy. You should do everything by hand." He sort of acknowledges that cheats like these need to happen sometimes if you want to hit a deadline. For example, this Honeywell is just part of my own little personal crusade to try to get one drawing up a day. And by the way, as we speak, I'm doing this in the morning, which is why I got my early morning voice. I'm chugging my coffee. Because again, it all falls down to the problem of art is art is a skill, and then art as a product that you need to get done on a certain time and on a certain budget and with certain constraints. Now, some artists are so good that they earn a the means and the clout that they can do stuff like that. They can be just big old giant weirdos and make weird demands like I want 100 takes of this and I want it in practical effects. But some of us don't, and we need to get a project out. And when a client or a person says, well, why hasn't this been done yet? You can't just throw your hands up and say art. It needs to get done sometimes. And Eric acknowledges that, but he seems to believe that these things should be kept dirty little secrets of the industry. In that, don't Google an image of a man having a heart attack and then sort of draw your Iron Man panel. That was another thing. I had art teachers, and I had a draft teacher who was not my draft teacher. He was my sketch, not sketch. Come on, what is this? Printing. He was my printing instructor. He was the head of the department. He was an amazing, just grizzled old guy. Like been around forever. And he became the head of the department. He was super laid back, unlike all the grad students who were like giant pricks. And then he used to say, because of course when you're sketching you have to, of course, have some sort of drawing skills. And he had a big binder of just reference materials because of course they didn't have Google around in the 50s and 60s and 80s. And he says he would, any image he'd rip it out of a magazine, because that's what magazines were for. They were basically books you can rip stuff out of, and he'd keep it in a big binder. And then he always used to say, well, you can have your references, but you got to be careful that no one notices that girl is in the same pose as this girl, and that girl is in the same pose as this one, or this tank you've been using every day since forever. That used to be called hiding your references or something like that. I don't know what. But now, of course, you have Google, and you can Google different poses, and then you can just sort of, I don't know, you can use whatever, or you can use, what Don Bluth used to do, record and photograph all of his references, and then animate over that. And enhance it, of course, to make it look, to make it move in ways that you couldn't in real life, and make it come alive in a different way, in a hyper realistic way. For example, this right here, this is a reference. I went to, let's see, where is it? I went to a little website. I have a couple of them. I have a folder full of 3 websites. It's either one of these quick poses, Senshi Stock, Sketch, whatever that is, and then Sketch Daily, which is all reference materials. And this is a reference of a girl hanging off a line and shooting a gun. And I was like, well, I just need a quick pose. I will just, you hit a button and it generates a random photo of a random pose. I was like, oh, okay, well, I like this pose. I have a binder on my computer called drawing subjects, which is whatever idea I have for a quick drawing, I will throw into this little folder. And there was a picture of Agent Honeydew on Twitter the other day, and I just threw her in there, and I was like, okay, well, I'll do that later. Again, this drawing is sort of representative of the topic, which is, well, using every quick tool you have to produce something. This thing, let's see, we're running at double speed, and this is, 35 minutes, so this took an hour. That's just for a quick drawing, just, pick a pose that you can find, make a little 3D model, and then just kind of strap it all together. And again, Eric seems sort of has the philosophy that these should all be dirty little secrets, and that that bragging about the process, and I don't think it's about bragging. I think it's more or less him sharing what he was going through and how he was creating this. I was, what did I just discovered, actually. I knew about him, but I just discovered his YouTube channel. I've been marathoning it. You have Captain Disillusion. And Captain Disillusion, he did a debunking video on trick shots, on how you can either use photo manipulation to make it look like you've made a basketball shot from a very long distance, or some sort of impossible feat occur. Just you take a shot of the background and you don't do anything with it. You then walk into the shot, you throw the ball, and you miss, of course, and then you just composite some sort of, either you making the actual shot from very, very close up and try to match it, or just make a digital basketball, if you have enough skill to do so. And then, of course, he did another type of a way of making those shots, and he said it looks like he's walking down a hallway and he just turns around and makes this little shot into a red cup, and he's like, you see, I did it. And then he goes and says, well, that's not representative of what happened. He attempted that shot like 50 times. And he said, well, this is a take, this is like take 57 of all these different takes. And we just did it until we got it right, and we got it until I didn't flub any lines, and I made the shot, and that's it. And then he pulls the curtain back a little further and says the show was not representative of his skill as an actor. He says it takes me 5 attempts at any given line, and he put in all of his bloopers, just of him not making trick shots, just talking to the camera and making mistakes. And he says, well, that's how it works. You gotta, like any skill, you gotta get better at it. And he said, representatively, practicing is what makes a lot of other like legitimate trick shot channels able to do what they do, because they practice all the time. And he said, as I was doing the shots and trying to make the attempts, he says I was getting better and better, and I can make the shots in about half the time now. And so that's I don't know, I think that's sort of a really empowering philosophy, to say, hey, guess what? This doesn't come together all at once. This is not something that I sit in front of a camera, I memorize my lines that I wrote, 5 minutes ago, and I'm able to repeat them back verbatim and then just move on and get the shot done. No, he says, he's basically saying this takes time. Skills take time to acquire. You can get easier and more adjusted to sitting in front of the microphone, which is what I'm attempting to do with this. You can get easier to wake up in the morning and just say, well, I'm going to kick out just one hour drawing, just to say that I can have produce something a day, and that's what you do. But it's about learning and about developing those skills. And again, you can argue, well, am I developing any skills if I'm using all these shortcuts? And it's like, well, yeah, I guess you are. I'm learning how to build a model in 3D and composite in a way that I like. That's and I'm still controlling the process, in that I didn't add just a line art filter in Blender and then use that, which I could have, but it looks really, really, really bad. There are scripts, there are different programs you can download to make it look less bad. The line art that you can produce in Blender, and you can export that as a PNG and have it just as a blank lines that you can then color in. But even the best ones, even the best looking line art that you can get from Blender, it still takes a lot of finesse. It takes a lot of understanding of the program. I've done it before, but it takes so long. And even then, the process of baking it, or not baking it, but having the computer make the image, you have to have high settings to make the line art real crisp and clean, and move in space. The thickness change, and that takes time too. I did that once on a background, and it took like an hour to produce the line art with this little. I don't have a super powerful computer. I've got one that'll run all my line art programs perfectly good. Clip Studio sometimes chugs when I have more than one model on screen. So again, that's sort of I think it's more or less balancing limitations the time you have with your artistic skill. Like, for example, I'm using a pose that I've found, but does the pose really matter if I'm using a real unrealistic cartoon with a big giant head and big meaty thighs and like high heels that don't exist in actual space, and a gun that doesn't actually exist? Like, I didn't copy the gun that the woman has in her hand. I made my own little 3D gun in like one of those like wacky 90 cartoon guns that absolutely doesn't exist. That would probably be highly scrutinized if an actual engineer looked at it. And again, if I had the clout, and if I had the as an artist, and I had the budget and said, oh, I want to do it all this way by hand, and then someone would agree to that and say, oh yeah, well, you're an artist and I don't know. Even then, that doesn't fly. We can all say, oh, corporations, and studios, they're all, they're repressive, and it's like, no, sometimes you just gotta know when to actually get the damn thing out the door, and in a way that's interesting, and of course develop your skills over time. Speaking of Dr. Disillusion, I saw his little tribute to Robert Zemeckis, whose movie career just like really revolutionized the media effects. Back to the Future, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, all those. Oh, by the way, I also learned from Dr. Disillusion that the actual term is called compositing. It's not 3D animation. Well, some of it's 3D animation. Like the new Lion King movie is 3D animation. The Jungle Book is compositing because it actually has a live person in it. What was my train of thought? I just kind of got off track. Oh, yeah, it's just, and I think you need, like, again, Eric, basically, he says these things should be kept dirty little secrets, or at least that's what I'm getting from his quote. But I'm thinking it's more empowering for other younger artists to not have to discover these things on their own, or just think to themselves, oh God, it's so hard. Why is everything so hard? Why can't I do it so easily like these other people? And I think it's like a little bit comforting to say, well, no, we do these things. Hard things, there's some things that just have to be done the hard way, and then some things that are just, you have to do it quickly and effectively. And this is a good, effective way of doing it. It's like you don't spend an hour sketching like 20 different poses and then coming up with that. Yes, do that. Do that on your own, because that'll make you a better draftsman, and that'll be a little practice. But don't take 3 hours on something that could take 1 hour if you just, look at a reference. Just say, okay, well, pick me out a random reference, internet, and then that'll help me move along with my day. And like I said, there's many different ways to get references. This is just one of them. People photograph themselves. There's now a new trend on Twitter of animators that started with Into the Spider-Verse, where animators themselves would act out their roles as Mary Ann, as Peter Parker, Mary Ann, Aunt May. I tried to combine Mary Jane and Aunt May. Oh boy, too early for this crap. But anyway, that's not exactly a trade secret. People have been doing that for as long as people have been animating. There's a shot of an animator working on the Three Caballeros, and he's got a mirror in front of him, and he's working on who's the rooster? Gosh, Donald, the rooster, and the parrot. Crap, I know that. I know their names. Juan? No. Don? Nah, whatever. But anyway, that was in one of my animation books, and that always stuck out on me. It's like, oh, okay, well, animators are just actors, it's been said. Shy actors who can take their time and absolutely perfect their performances with a fine-tooth comb, if they so choose. And you could say, okay, well, that's different. You're producing something. You're not just finding something. And that's true. That's true. Technology is getting to the point where you can now. I just saw something called Expressions, and it's a new 3D, or not a new. It's a new animation kind of thing, where you can make, I guess, a greeting card with animation, and it's got pre-produced animation cycles of like a little crab, and he's dancing, and then you can have him dancing from side to side or spin on his head, and it's like, oh, okay. I like the style. The style it's way more original than, what was that weird, stupid drag and drop click animation? Go Animate, gosh. Yeah, I think that it's a lot better than Go Animate, because it at least has a distinctive style. But yeah, there's getting to the point where we're on the internet. You could build your own 3D model, and then you can just grab capture footage of people dancing or people run cycles. You can grab that off the internet and just have it done. And I don't know. Again, I think those are nice tools, and they're especially great tools for people learning. But then you got to go and then push yourself a little further to figure out, okay, what's a good running cycle? How did people used to do this in the old days, where they just had pen and paper, and they needed to actually produce the action before they actually even shot one frame of wasted the precious film. So I can sort of see where Eric is coming from, who's sort of from this like grizzled old school way of thinking, where it's like, you know what, yeah, you can do it. Keep that shit a secret, keep it. Don't brag about using cheats. And then you have sort of where it's like, no, we're all trying to learn how to do things. And if you can be open and honest and say, well, yeah, I have to do this sometimes in order to do things. Now, like I said at the very beginning, these chains are not without their faults. They bend in a certain way that chains shouldn't really do. I'm almost done with the video, so yeah, they're not without their faults. It's more of an aesthetic thing to get the drawing done real quick. If you needed to show the chains actually doing something, you'd have to probably draw each one by hand, or, like I did with this video, actually make some sort of 3D model, which is totally within the realm of possibility of making your own 3D model now, and moving it within one program. I'm using piecemeal because I'm using Paint Tool Saya, which is strictly a draft tool. It's got the best stabilizer out there, I think. And but no, I think you can totally do that in like Clip Studio. You can do load all sorts of 3D models in there. Not as advanced as, say, like moving a chain through 3D. I think you'd have to make a composite shot in Blender and then add that all together. And again, that sort of takes some skill. It took skill. It took him time and effort to make this chain brush, which is at least, I think, maybe 2 links added together. He needed 2 drawings, and then he needed to find the right setting to put them together, and then find the right way, right settings. So even the brush that is a cheat is not without its own artistic merit. I will say, now that I'm looking at it, there's one chain sort of folds under one of the skulls in a way that's not realistic. He should have probably fixed that a little bit, maybe add it to a different layer and then moved it underwards. So again, it's not, you save time, but it's, if people look over it with a fine-tooth comb, then people are not gonna find those mistakes. But then again, even if you did it by hand drawing, you could probably still make those mistakes. You wouldn't take enough time to figure out, oh well, does this lay right? Is this line overlapping a different line? There's something. Some person was really bugged when it really bugged them when I did this. Where one line on an object in the background follows a different line and an object in the foreground, and it disrupts the flow of the line. It makes it look like those two lines are like bleeding into each other when they're really on 2 different objects overlapping each other. I forget what term he used. Oh well, we'll save that for another day. But anyway, everybody, I think that'll do for today. Take care, enjoy yourself, and see you next time. Bye.